Are
Hello,
we?
everybody. We are now live.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fossil Friday web chat stream with the Raymond M Alf Museum. We're here with Gabriel Santos, who
That's
is
me.
the outreach coordinator for the Alf Museum. And I'm Brittany Stoneberg. I am the outreach and communications coordinator for the Western Science Center. And if you weren't able to join us last week, we are bringing paleontologists to you today to talk about their research. So we're going to be doing this every week, every Fossil Friday. So you can join us now and you can join us in the future. And today we have paleontologist and PhD grad student at Virginia Tech, Khanh To.
Yay.
Everyone.
Icon. Welcome.
Welcome. And so she is going to be talking about beaks today. Her research uses modern animal anatomy and diversity to better understand the anatomy of extinct ones and how they are reconstructed. She also enjoys going on early hikes, immersing in bird photography, and baking some fresh lemon loaves. And I think we're all doing a bit more baking than we're used to lately.
Everyone's pretending they're on the Great British Baking Show right now, I'm sure.
Pretty much, I'm doing the same
The
thing.
most calming of shows.
Isn't it? It's like the show we need right now in this time.
Exactly.
I
All
would
right,
agree.
everybody. So Khan is going to get started in just a moment. We have, if you are interested in asking her a question about her research, about her work as a paleontologist, feel free to drop that in the chat. I will be taking questions afterwards and referring those to Khan, and hopefully we'll get to everybody's questions before we end today. So, Khan, whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Let me figure out this share screen things again. Let's see. Share screen 2. And then. All right. So thank you for the lovely introduction. And thank you for joining us this afternoon and evening for those of us in the East Coast. My name is Khanh To, and before we take a bite out of this topic about beaks, a short introduction, as she just mentioned, second year PhD student at Virginia Tech. I really enjoy going outside and things like that, but as of currently, that's not really possible. And here on my shoulder, this is Frank. He won't be guest starring us today because he doesn't sit still very well while he's out of his tank, but he will be in the background cheering me on. Some of the research topic that I am interested in is understanding how soft tissue, such as muscle, ligaments, and nerves, along with hard tissues, integrate together in an animal. And how does it all work? And I focus specifically on the feeding system, so the jaw muscle and all whatnot. I have always been fascinated by diversity of what we currently have. And as a young kid, as I'm, going down this rabbit hole of natural science, I discovered that the diversity that we currently have is merely a fraction of whatever existed. So I really want to use the modern diversity of what we have now to better understand and reconstruct extinct animals and how they interact with, other things and their environment. If I am going too fast, please let me know. I'm more than happy to slow down my pace. Let's see. So many of us actually are very familiar with this concept, but I will brush up on it. A trophic level is a way for us to place an animal or an organism in a position in their food chain, in the trophic level. And this is based on what it eats or what eats it. You have your primary producers, such as plants, cyanobacteria, and algae that don't need to consume other organism to get its energy. And then you have your various level of consumers. You have your primary consumer that eat these primary producer. You have your secondary consumer, and then you have your tertiary consumer. And all of these animals form what we call a food web. And these animals are in order for us to put these animals in a food web, we become very reliant on what they eat. So the understanding what an animal eats gives us a better idea of what the environment of that particular time and place is like, and its diversity, what animals are there, how are they all interacting with each other. So when we find a fossilized animal, we, after brushing it up, cleaning it, and identifying whether it's a new specimen or whether it is something we've already known, we would like to know what they eat. And usually teeth is one of the way for us to tell what this animal has eaten or what they consume. And if you were not here for last week, Tara gave a great talk about teeth and their evolution, so check it out if you haven't seen it. And when we look at the skull, it's very important to, again, look at the teeth to find out how it could consume its food. But every once in a while, we run into things like this Nyctosaurus, which is a pterosaur that have no beak and that have no teeth and have a beak. And it can be a little difficult to assess what it eats because teeth, the things that help us show or help us know what it eats, is missing. So let's finally take a bite at what is a beak. A beak is described as having this combination of character. The jawbones have no teeth on them, and they are sometimes fused together. However, it is not seen in some lineages. There are also small holes or foramina on the jawbone that serve as the place for blood vessels and nerve endings to go through. And there is also the presence of a rampotheca that covers the jawbones. These are all characteristics that we currently observe in both birds and turtles today. And while we're here, I do want to clarify that this particular beak system that I'm going to be talking about the whole time is only observed in tetrapods. In fish, while it is also a vertebrate, they modify their jaw crazily and extensively, and living in the water have a different biomechanical constraint than living on land. So it's very hard to, it can be difficult to construct how they all related to, to each other. And of course, I'm not forgetting the beaks on our octopus and invertebrate friends. However, they don't have any jaws, and the material that covers their beak is made out of a completely different material. It's made out of chitin, so not something that we find in tetrapod at all. And therefore, I will not be covering that in this talk either. I am more than happy to chit chat more about beaks in fish and octopus. Not very, well versed in it, but more than happy to talk about it in our Q&A time. I mentioned there is the presence of a rampotheca in the beak system. What is it? It is a keratinous sheath covering the jawbones. And this keratinous sheath, again, is made out of keratin. And keratin, we are all pretty familiar with keratin. Our hair is made out of it. Bird's feathers are made out of it. The claw coverings, spine coverings, our nails are made out of it. It's a very hard and durable material. And the rampotheca is then further divided into a rhinotheca and a gnathotheca. A rhinotheca is the keratin layer that covers the upper jaw, and then the gnathotheca is a keratin layer that covers the lower jaw. What currently have beaks today, there are only 2 lineages currently have it now. It is very unfortunate, but we still have them. We have turtles and birds as 2 lineages that have beaks today. Unlike turtles, beak in birds are much more diverse. They ranges from their different sizes to their different shape to their different function. And if you go out birding, you will quickly see the various beak shape and diversity. So we talked about modern beaks, and this is a paleo talk, so I will take you down a short trip down the geological time and discover what else in the fossil record have beaks. To orient you, here is the geological scale on the bottom. And at around 400 million years ago, our tetrapod and tetrapod friends first came out onto land in the Devonian. And by this time, teeth and tooth-like structures have appeared in various lineages. It is not until the Permian, however, that some of the first beak appeared in the fossil record, the Dicynodons, early lineages within synapsids. It is unfortunate, however, that the Permian and the Triassic extinction wiped out these synapsids and paved way for the beak, the strange beak that comes out of the Triassic. In the Triassic, there is a whole slew of strange and beaked animals. Actually, they're just a whole slew of strange animal in general, but we're just going to focus on the strange beaked one today. We have Trilophosaur, an archosauromorph with a beak and some really strange dentitions. You have Rhynchosaur, another strange and herbivorous archosauromorph with big cheeks and a beak. You have Ephygia, an early crocodile relative that has been found to also have a beak. Trypanosaur, if you haven't seen these, I think you're missing out, because Trypanosaur is super bizarre with a claw on its tail and also a beak. They're just built very bizarre. So if you have time, look up some of these strange animal. In the Triassic water, there is a marine reptile called Endanosaurus, and it has a beak also. And some of the early turtle found in the Triassic started to lose their teeth and gain a beak, such as this Eorhynchochelis. At the end of the Triassic, unfortunately, again, this experimentation ended, and with the Triassic and Jurassic extinction. However, some lineages such as the early turtle, the early dinosaur, and the early crocodilian relatives survive and make it into the Jurassic. In the Jurassic, our dinosaurs start to diversify, and we see some very familiar faces. Many lineages of the Ornithischian dinosaurs, so your bird hip dinosaurs, started to come around, and Stegosaurus, Ankylosaurus, and early ceratopsians have all been found to have a beak and also teeth. These were all herbivorous animals, by the way. In the Cretaceous, the beak diversity bloomed, with ceratopsians having its beautiful frills and its beautiful head ornamentation along with their beak were everywhere. We have the later diverging Cretaceous pterosaur that eventually some of the lineage lose teeth and gain the beak. We then have various theropod meat-eating dinosaur lineage that then gain a beak, including the ornithomimids or the bird mimic theropod dinosaurs, the oviraptors, your egg thieves, the strange and really bizarre Therizinosaur, and then, of course, the stem bird group avialans. Of course, all of this beakiness, a good chunk of it came to an end during the KPG extinction 66 million years ago. And in the Cenozoic, the two lineage that survive is the avian dinosaurs, and then you have the turtles that survive, and they took over the niches along with some mammals roaming about. And we then end up with the two lineage that we have now in the modern age. And I keep talking about all these beaks and why it is, and why we walk through the geologic time for it. Well, teeth and tooth-like structure was a major breakthrough for vertebrates. And strangely, many of these lineages that are not closely related to each other then lose teeth and then gain a beak. And some of us speculate on why this happened. Some of it, we might think that it is due to its versatility in diet. Turtles and birds today eat a very wide variety of diet with just their beak. You have grains-eating bird, you have meat-eating birds and turtle, you have nectar-sipping birds, and then you have jellyfish-eating turtles. And having a beak could also be biomechanically favorable. If you've ever seen a parrot crushing a nut, you have an idea that these beaks could deliver some force in them. And so this could be a way for them to pulverize harder food. And then this one theory is quite speculative. It is way out there, but by having a beak and not having to chew anymore, these animals switch to having a digestive tract that is much more much stronger to process all this food. But this is very out there, and will take a little bit to think about. What is the issues that we're running into, though? One of them is that one of the component of the beak, the Rampotheca, the keratinous sheath, is either missing or very rare in the fossil record. It's really strange. We're not really sure why, but keratin, the material that makes up the Rampotheca, degrades and preserved differently in feather, claw, and in the Rampotheca. Take this Confuciornis specimen come out of the J-hole biota that was described in 2018, for example. This particular specimen have beautiful feather impressions preserved. They have a beautiful claw covering, or at least the impression of it, preserved. But while the authors talk about having the specimen having Rampotheca, it is not technically preserved on the fossil themselves. So in the end, what are we missing? We end up being missing several key things like the shape of the beak or the size of the beak, the fine structural details of the beak, and then in the end, the full function of this beak. And in my dissertation, I will be trying to address the fine structural details of this particular piece of the puzzle that we're missing by using modern animals, specifically birds, to answer this question. So we have our specimen in the lab, and we want to perform a histology or thin section of this beak portion. And this has been a very common way for anatomists to study the finer cellular details of the anatomical features on an animal. And with this, we produce many slices of the beak, and we are able to look at this under the microscope. The Rampotheca itself is made out of keratin, as I said, but it's made out of different variation of keratin. So with this, these different variation of keratin have their different hardness. And we want to use the microindentation, which is a technique to test hardness, to, again, test hardness on the beak and to see which part of the beak is made out of what kind of keratin. And here we then map all of those points onto a CT scan reconstruction of the jaw or the entire skull itself in order to give us a better idea of the overall reconstruction of its microstructure. And with that, we hope to see the finer structural detail that is produced by these different microstructure. And with this, we also want to see the different bony correlate signature made by the different keratin on the beak. And these details are then used to look at various fossils to see what these fossil beaks initially look like. In a larger picture, as we step back, understanding how the beak is constructed or its shape can help us understand who ate who or who ate what. How did this beak function for this particular animal? Did this beak then was used for something else for this animal? And then last but not least, we then talk about the convergent evolution in a broader context. Were all these beaks anatomically the same? Are they built the same, or are all these lineages repeatedly, uh, you know, making the same type of beak? So I really want to address all those questions. And with that, I want to thank all of these people here for discussion and thoughts on my project and help with specimens and lab access to my funding source. And I'm more than happy to answer some questions. Thank you.
Great job, Khan.
Great job.
Yay.
So, hi everyone. We are in a little bit of a delay, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat and we will go ahead and answer. We've got plenty of time to do that.
Khan, do you want to unshare your screen really quick?
Oh, yes, I can. Sorry.
It's okay.
Well, totally forgot about that. Ha. Technology.
Great.
That was really cool stuff. The stuff that I've never even heard of before.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with beaks myself, so this was very interesting.
I didn't really think beak was any more than anything until I started looking into it. And I was like, wait, why do these things look like this? What is going on?
Here's a question from Ashley Hall. Hi, Ashley. She wants to know, what is your favorite beak?
Oh gosh, my favorite beak. Maybe this is not a beak. My favorite beak. I really enjoyed crossbills. So these are these high elevation birds that their bill cross like this to help them essentially grab pine cone seeds. So if you see there's video on YouTube that shows when they open their jaw, they kind of they kind of open this way. So they pry the pine cone open for them to grab seeds out, which is completely wild. Like, why do you do that? What?
Awesome. Here's another question. This is from the Alf Museum stream. This is from Diana. Is there a particular species you are interested in studying that has a beak?
Oh, is she talking modern or is she talking?
She does not specify. So go with either.
Okay, so obviously in the modern, I am doing birds a lot more than turtles. But in the fossil record, I would like to see pterosaur and their strange headness, because the Cretaceous pterosaur end up having these really crazy ornamentation, which are then we hypothesize that they have keratin covering on them. And it will be kind of neat to see if what I'm doing on the beak would apply onto the crest and not just their face. Well, it's technically still their face, a different part of the face. The Nyctosaurus that I showed earlier in the talk is one of my favorite. It's just so bizarre, and I want to see it.
Pterosaurs are just bizarre in general to me, honestly. They're just so weird in their whole body, but I've never really thought about like beaks. But if you look at like some of the reconstructions and pictures of pterosaurs, you're just like, what the heck? Like sometimes their beaks are longer than their whole bodies. It seems like, right?
Yeah, some birds do have beaks longer than their own body, like hummingbirds and whatnot, but they never really reach the size that pterosaurs get sometimes. And it's a little strange to think about it because Quetzalcoatlus is as tall as a giraffe. I would be terrified to see a giraffe-sized bird.
That's like a real life dragon too.
Yeah, exactly. It would just be kind of terrifying, honestly.
So
maybe if I stay inside long enough, the birds will evolve. Maybe natural selection, do your thing.
So here's a question from Rob at the Alf Museum stream. Hey, Rob. I've always heard that as avian dinosaurs gained the ability to fly, the evolution of a beak was a way to lose weight. Can you speak to this theory a little? What do you think?
So I don't really think losing teeth is a huge weight loss. So as birds lose its way to grab with its forearm because it's being modified to wings. The head itself is being modified into a third hand. A bird's beak is extremely dexterous. They use it for a ton of things. They use it for preening themselves. They use it for making nests. They use it to steal your shiny things. So they do a lot with their face, and I I don't think the loss of teeth is a huge weight reduction. I think I remember reading something about that, but it's more like gaining a more dexterous hand. And the reason why I say this is because there is a lineage of uh, Cenozoic birds, the Odontopteryptes, that are tooth-bearing birds, and they're huge. They're enormous. They're like large seafaring birds, and they died out obviously, but they were around for a little while. So I don't think teeth reduction is a huge thing on weight loss.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. And then this one is from Alexa, who is 7. And she's asking, can you tell her a little bit about owl beak evolution?
Owl beak? Okay. Owl beak. I love owls. I think they're super great. They are super fluffy, but they're just ferocious predators. It's great. But owl beaks, some of the fossil owls that we recognize are already very owl-like. Their 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 jaw is, the bone itself is already curved down. So when we think about the beak shape itself, it doesn't vary from that a lot. So again, the recurve of the beak itself is to help the owl kind of tear meats apart. So I think their evolution is to help them, better grab their prey and things like that.
Cool. That was a very good question.
I agreed.
And I love owls.
My favorite
Their head is so strange. Their eye are enormous.
Very long time, last year, I helped rescue a owl off the side of the road, and staring into that thing's eyes was terrifying.
Both your things are cool. For me, the reason owls are my favorite is because of this book called The Guardians of Ga'Hoole, and that's the only reason I really love owls.
That's a very good reason. And see, some people on the chat are agreeing with us that owls are the best.
Okay,
yes,
great.
Here's a question from Melissa. What are the evolutionary benefits to having a beak compared to a mouth?
So some of the reason why we think that a beak came about is just because when you have a beak, you can just, whatever you can grab in your mouth, you can really just eat it. The diet versatility when you have a beak is kind of expanded, because if you look at turtles and birds today, there are 2 lineages that have a beak. They eat just a slew of different things. You have jellyfish eating in turtle, you have nectar eating in birds, you have meat eating in both. So there could be a versatility in diet that opens up for these animals. Some beaks provides a really nice shearing surface. So like for ceratopsian, those beak end up shearing plants off much easier. You can just like grab, strip a fern of its leaves. So there could be, again, versatility in diet. Sometimes it could be more biomechanically favorable. So you have a nut and it's really hard. If you try to crack a nut with your teeth, it's kind of painful actually, because the force is not equally distributed. But having a beak, you have that one fine point. And if you see a parrot cracking a nut, it's actually kind of scary because you see this beak go and crack open this nut. So they could crunch on hard things much easier, having a beak, having that one point of focus. So it could be a biomechanical advantage for these animals too.
I got bit by a
Awesome.
bird one time at a petting zoo, and it hurt, and it scared the heck out of me. It's why I'm still afraid of dinosaurs today.
I just don't, sometimes I look at the geese and I'm like, ah, yes, you're so nice. And then it looks at me and I was like, yep, nope, I'm done.
No, geese are the
That's a dive.
worst.
Look at me. All you gotta do is look at me and I'm checked out.
Awesome. Well, looks like that we have covered all of the questions from our chat today. Khan, I just want to say thank you again for joining us. That was very informative, and I hope everybody got to learn a lot about beaks. I know I did.
Yes,
Connor,
thank you so much for having me.
I have a question for you really quick. Did you
What's
always
up?
want to work on beaks, and did you always want to be a paleontologist, even when you were a little Con?
Very good question.
Oh man. So growing up as an Asian American uh, person, paleo is not something that is in our vocabulary or in our career choice. And so I was always interested in the natural and the natural science. And I just went down a rabbit hole and I was like, oh my gosh, all these cool things that used to live. What were these like? Why how could we learn from this past life? And how could we use the things that are now still with us to learn about these past lives is some it just sort of sparked and I just sort of went on and I honestly love Spinosaurus, so my guilty pleasure is in that area, and it just sort of spiral into learning why some of these animals have such a crazy looking head. Like the head is so important. We use it for so many things, and some of these animals modify it to an extreme state. And knowing how all of these different components integrate into this one cohesive system is I could spend days talking about it and lifetimes to study it. So yeah, it's sort of like a fun little spiral that just got hooked, and then you know things just happen.
Nice. Do you ever think about doing paleontology in Asia sometimes?
Yes, I would love to. I think the Southeast Asian area is so rich in resource, and there's just not a lot of attention paid to it, just because it is under it's a developing country, and so sometimes they don't have the resources to go into that. But I would love to do paleo in Asia, in Southeast Asia, for sure. It would be nice to highlight my country down the road,
That
for
would be
sure.
awesome. You're doing a great job right now, like showing people that you can do it. Because like for me, it's a very similar background, being Filipino.
Hmm.
Not very many or option of it. It's either you're a nurse or a doctor sometimes, right? And so being able to go out there and show people would be awesome. We should do a tour of Asia and do Southeast Asia paleontology tour one day, Con.
Ooh, I'm so down. You should write me down on that.
Let's do it.
I'm
I'm
perfectly okay with that.
Sounds awesome.
That'd be amazing.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again, Khan. We really enjoyed talking with you today. We'll be back next week with another Fossil Friday web chat. And just as a reminder, if you want to support either of our museums, the Western Science Center and the Raymond M. Alf Museum, we are still operating. We are still trying to bring you science from Southern California and beyond. So there will be some links after the show that you can go to support our museums and find out more about our different initiatives as we are all working from home.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.